The Longevity Lounge is proudly brought to you by AIA Australia, dedicated to helping Australians live healthier, longer, better lives. Welcome to Younger Longer Longevity Lounge. Today we're joined by Craig Cooper, a true powerhouse in entrepreneurship, venture capital, media and wellness. He's a serial investor, author and TV host with a remarkable career spanning tech, media, health and fitness. He's led major corporate ventures from Lionsgate's wellness division to pioneering digital health platforms. Currently, he's the Group CEO of ASX-listed medtech company Cardiex. Beyond business, he's a former national champion in Taekwondo and skateboarding. He's also an avid adventurer and the author of Your New Prime, a guide to healthy aging for men. Get ready for an inspiring conversation with a true innovator.
So, Craig, welcome to the lounge.
Yeah, good to see you, Carl. Thanks for having me on.
Long time, Craig. Long time.
Yeah, a long time guy.
40 years, I would have thought, since I've last seen you.
Our paths crossed at two very life-changing points for us. I was on the beach in 1984, cheering you on the beach, when you were finishing your first race, when I was like a grommet on the Gold Coast, living in Wharf Road surfing after moving from New Zealand. And then 2 years later, when we were in the Manly Surf Club, when I eventually moved down to Sydney, went back and did my high school certificate for a year because I finished school when I was 14 in New Zealand. So I went back 7 years later. And when I got my HSC results, I walked down to the surf club. I went to sit on the wall, and you were sitting on the wall next to me. You came over. Yeah, what's up? I said, oh, just got my HSC results. I said, cool, let's open them up. And we opened my HSC results together on the beach in Manly. So not something you probably remember, but I remember that very clearly. And I went into, economics law in Sydney and do a bunch of things. But that was a big moment in my life. And so it was kind of cool that, both of us were there when sort of we had these life-changing events, right?
You must have got a reasonable score then to be able to go on and do that.
I remember I got 456 out of 500. Wow. And at that time, it was like the top 0.5%. And I remember you literally having a heart attack. You were like, you couldn't believe it.
Me.
And it stuck in my mind forever.
Oh, and I thought, this little shit, he's done me by about 150 points.
Lisa, you finished school when you were 15. I mean, I don't think you did year 11 and 12 at all.
I got moved on.
That's correct. Yeah, involuntarily. Craig, thanks so much for joining us. I know you've got an incredible career. You're doing incredible work in terms of health and fitness, and you have done for a very long time, in a really applied manner too. I'd like to know a little bit more about the drive behind your activity and why it's been so diverse and so ferocious for so long.
Well, I think from focusing on health, it's really been twofold, and it's kind of evolved. I think principally it was more of a selfish endeavor, Carl, because I had a very sick childhood and, even into sort of my early and sort of later adult years, so I was really, through pretty much all of my life been looking for, tools, techniques, hacks in order to sort of make myself better and be able to thrive as much as I could. I was in a coma when I was 9 for a month, brain inflammation. I nearly lost my left leg when I was 11 from a viral infection in my leg. I had sort of multiple instances of pericarditis, which is an inflammation of the heart, through sort of my 16th, 17th, and 18th years while I was living on the Gold Coast of Australia. And I've still today got a genetic predisposition to prostate cancer and type 2 diabetes. So I've just had a lot of shit happen to me. As I've aged, obviously, as we're all in sort of this zone at the moment, really just trying to get the best tools that I can use from a personal perspective in order to just thrive better. And then the second part of it is really sort of what evolved after that, and into my book and some of the other stuff that I've done is sort of then taking that and really sort of trying to use it as the best platform that I can in order to sort of provide that information to men of our age. Because when I wrote the book 6 years ago, there was very little information about sort of the health aspects that really affect us as we age. I mean, you look at Men's Health magazine, it's like, abs and biceps. Really the health industry has just been sort of bifurcated into, very sort of cosmetic channels. No one was looking at, hormonal health. No one was looking at sexual health, mental health, emotional health, physical health as you age, really the things that matter to us, as opposed to being, 20 and, at a CrossFit box, right? So how could I sort of communicate those aspects of wellness to a sort of generation that kind of wasn't being catered for? So really that was my sort of passion. It's kind of evolved in my business now, and my public company, and all the products that we're releasing, particularly around heart health. So really that was really the genesis of it, Carl.
You sent over your book. I knew about it. You came out with the book 7 years ago. I'll get this over to you, Carl, so you can improve your life. But I flicked through it this morning on the deck as I was having my morning coffee before we jumped in here. And it seems to me that, 7 years ago, and longevity's become a thing since then, but going through the different chapters, mate, you're spot on with where the problems are and what people need to do. Like, it's become all sort of mystified now, and there's all these sort of whiz-bang sort of products that have come up in the last few years, but you're just talking about the basics, which are the most important things.
Yeah, totally. And the stuff that really affect us, from the point of view of the hormonal disorders. And, when I talk about that, that's from sleep to prostate cancer, right? The emotional health issues that we face as we age. But then from as you go through the more detail each year, you'll see, a lot of stuff that's just becoming sort of today's, TikTok memes is really the stuff that I've been talking about for many, many, many years. We were cold plunging, 15 years ago when, Wim Hof was just, a little kid in this sector. He was coming up to train with us at Laird Hamilton's house in Malibu, and, we're doing infrared. I've had one in my, house for the last, 25 years, and testosterone therapy, peptides, fasting, all this stuff is really, everything old is kind of new again. And I think, one of the benefits of aging is that, you become a little bit wiser to things, and you learn a lot along the way as to sort of what works and what doesn't. So, yeah, I mean, as you said, just we're so focused on small biohacks, right? And I call them the small rocks. It's really like Stephen Covey's big rock, small rock theory, right? It's really, how do we focus on the big rocks, which are really going to be impactful around your health, and as we're both doing in terms of, cardiovascular health, and really use that as a platform for really driving impact in the healthcare sector.
Sorry, are you surprised that longevity's jumped since COVID? I mean, the Peter Attias and Andrew Hubermans and these people have come to the fore. Did you think that was something that was going to happen moving forward with an aging population, or are you a little bit surprised on how quick it's sort of taking sort of momentum?
Yeah, I think it was a perfect storm for the genesis of what I call the health bros, right? Because everyone was locked inside, everyone became much more socially active, everyone became much more thirsty for content. And, this group of sort of health influencers just carved out this corner of the internet that was, really amplified by COVID, by the fact that people were just spending so much more time socially. So, look, there's positives and negatives around it, but I think ultimately more positive in terms of from an educational perspective. But I think the amplification of the industry is becoming more of a serious issue as sort of everyone looks for their corner of the internet in terms of the extremes around what they're trying to promote for health in order to, create, larger followings and a larger platform. So we just got to keep an eye on it and be resourceful in our research, because, the truth is really hard to find, especially today. It's easy to create fiction on the internet, particularly from the perspective of health, but really diving down and into the studies and PubMed and really getting into the researches. We're relying so much on these people now to do it for us. And, often it's more clicks than truth.
Craig, you did mention before, and I think this is really important for the listeners that haven't read your book and may not have the time to read your book or have much exposure to you, but you talked about the big rocks. And I know you're very dedicated, and health in general is always a juggle of a plethora of things, but those big rocks probably change over time based on your level of knowledge, to your last point. Can you talk to us a little bit about those big rocks, what you found to be fundamental in this area?
For the purposes of what I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'll qualify it by the fact that I'm talking as a, N of one. I'm talking about myself, right? Because, when you look at the industry and what's populated into the sector, it's like a catch-all for everybody, right? It's like everyone should be fasting, everyone should be plunging, everyone should be taking saunas. But I mean, it's more often than not the case, particularly when, you think, 58% of the US population has hypertension. So ergo, 58% of people should not be cold plunging as adults in terms of the health risk. So for me, really what's changed, if I look back, I did an article a few years back, what I'm doing now in my 50s that I, wasn't doing in my 40s. So I think now in my 60s, as I look back, what am I doing now? Well, I'm resting more for sure. I'm training heavy, but only usually the 80%. Or I'm doing less long, slow distance, just from the perspective of maintaining my hormonal health, particularly my testosterone and human growth hormone. I'm not fasting because I have bone density issues, crazily enough, with all the sort of weight work and sort of, dietary interventions that I do around it. So I'm not fasting, but I think that's me. From the purposes of sort of general sort of population, I mean, sleep to me is my biggest health challenge, and I think it drives everything as you get older. Hormonal, growth hormones, cardiovascular health, insulin resistance. You can just tick off all the boxes, and it's the biggest thing I struggle with. And I've been a student of it for as long as I can remember, but I just do the best I can. So sleep is instrumental. Lifting weights, and I know guys doing more and more of that, in the last couple of years. So lifting weights, I do weights every day. So normally my day is I'll do some sort of cardiovascular exercise, either mountain biking, hiking, or ocean swimming. Then I'll always do weight training after that. And, a lot of pharma carriers, a lot of stuff that's focused on probably to your question, Carl, one of the big rocks for me is avoiding frailty as I age, right? And for me, from the perspective of my bone health in terms of having, balance, stability, strength, muscle mass, so to prevent falls, all those little things that really take you out of action. So I focus on that a lot. And then from a, dietary perspective, look, if I was to summarize it, it's basically the Mediterranean diet. I eat a lot of protein. I don't eat as much as I should. So in my book, I say it's kind of like a gram per pound, and I'm like 184, 187 pounds. What's that? 84.
It'd be 84 or something, yeah.
Yeah. So I eat about 60 to 70% of that because I really try and balance insulin growth hormone, so IGF-1. So for me, that's a sort of a key biomarker, blood biomarker that I focus on, because it's both positive from a cardiovascular perspective, but it's negative from an anabolic growth perspective for cancers. So protein plays a big part in the synthesis of IGF-1, and mine's super high. And because I've got a risk of prostate cancer, I kind of like keep an eye on that.
And Carl's in his 50s, so we're both tipped into the 60s, right? So, and everything you've said then with what you do now, to the letter, I do as well. So it's so interesting that I went, you know what, I need to lift heavier now, but I don't need to train for as long. I go and do the long stuff because the endurance stuff, because it's just going to beat my body down. I need to rest more. I need to get 7 or 8 hours sleep a night, and I need to monitor it, whereas I never used to. So they're all the things I think that as people get older, they're good tips for people to think about. And the other one for me was that food became a much more important factor in my life, because you just can't keep bouncing back with your body. And my body started rejecting things like gluten, dairy, and went, nah, and sugar. And I went, nah, you keep doing that and you're going to feel sick. And that's just the way it is. For you, because of your medical issues when you were younger, did you find that it meant that you kept an eye on, from a doctor's point of view and preventative health, were you much more aligned to that and knowing exactly where you were through your life? Because it sounds like you're very good at knowing your markers, and you're obviously got a doctor or a team of people that do your bloods, and you're sort of all over it.
Yeah, I've got a really expensive care team now. Not so well, I've had for some time, but when I was, in the Brisbane hospital when I was 18 years old, getting my chest cut open, And coming out of that, into my little 2-bedroom place on the Gold Coast, I didn't have, the resources or the access that I do now. But I do, looking back, Lichi, remember how psychotic I was even in those days, right? I remember putting my, little chicken patties in the oven because I didn't want to cook them in oil and have too much fat and all that sort of stuff, right? Going back even to, when I was 18 or 19. And I've always been in pretty good shape, but, because I'm naturally gifted and I've got super high, it's a positive and a negative when you age. I've got super high testosterone levels, kicking, hitting, or just touching, 1,000. The range is 200 literally to 1,000. So, it's a big problem for my wife. She keeps complaining, but I'm happy with it. So I'm lucky that I've always been able to put on muscle mass easy, and I've always been pretty lean. But yeah, it's been a lifelong journey for me. And people ask, how long you train, and it's my whole life. Right? I can't think of a single time in my life where, I've been, I don't know, is it on the wagon or off the wagon? Keep getting the confused. Yeah.
Well, Carl's exactly the same. I'm, for Carl, because he's pretty much, like a decade behind you and I find it interesting because some of the challenges I have for a sort of a 50-year-old is different to a 60-year-old. It nearly goes in like decades where you can
Totally.
look back over your time and go, oh, I'm not recovering as well as I was, and you've hit 50.
Yeah.
Or in your 40s, you're like, geez, my eyesight's not as good when I read, or I've just gone and, I've done a calf running for the first time. So there's it's like this
3 days ago.
You could write a book on that, just on the decade changes and what you could do as a sort of a way of just getting on top of it, knowing what we know for people coming through.
Oh, yeah. I did my first calf injury like 4 days ago, going for a run around the hills, and I'm just going, like, seriously? Wow. Like, I was like doing a run, walk kind of hike, and my calf went. It's like, seriously? Yeah. But you're right, it's cliffs, right? It's literally cliffs. It's 50, 55. I mean, I hate to say we're programmed, because epigenetically, I think we're all trying to push that, back as much as possible. But it just feels like it's programmed.
We sort of are a bit, though, aren't we? There are certain things that you can stretch it out. Like, so I did my calf at 48 in a 2-day race with Brad Bevan. We were racing together. It was a team's event against a whole bunch, and I tweaked the calf for the first time. I'm like, that doesn't feel right. I've never felt that before, but you got away with it for a lot longer. So, you can sort of drag it out, I think, but, it's, in certain ways, some things are sort of preordained.
Totally. And just getting back to one final comment on that, if anyone tells me I need, 7 to 9 hours of, sleep again, I'm just going to just shoot me, right? I'm just sick of hearing it, particularly when you look at, from our age, we know that, heard it 1,000 times, but for us, it's sleep is psychological and physiological for us as we age. Because, just like with sort of menopausal impact with women, it's the same with men with, nocturia and benign prostatic hyperplasia and frequent urination and all the hormonal changes we go through. So there's the physiological aspect of it. And then from a psychological aspect, obviously it's stress at work and, anxiety and around everything that's going on in life, as well as, social media and all that, which impacts us. So again, like I mentioned at, the top of the hour, it's just not one size fits all. And I think, all of us have got to look individually. And I think that's the benefit about having the amplification of the influencer market, because I think those resources are now available to everybody, class and irrespective of class, gender, income levels. Everyone can dial into YouTube now and get access to that information, which, previously was really only available kind of to the 1%ers.
Craig, I'm going to take us on a little journey. You've mentioned a few things, and this is sort of going to tap you for advice. So, you talked about your biomarkers, your bone density. For those listeners that want to, one, rely on the basic or the more intuitive factors, what are those key things they should be focusing on? And then if they did have the inclination to delve a little bit deeper into their physical and psychological health, what would you recommend? When you say a bone density, I go to a DEXA scan, which not everyone has access to or even knows about. But I think if we bring it back a little bit and say, at a basic level, if we're looking to be at least high performing, if not prime, what is it that everyone should know about?
Well, I think starting with the basic lipid panels and metabolic panels, which I think, like in Australia, we get your inflammation panels, your liver panels, your insulin-resistant panels, HbA1c here in the United States, fasting insulin. And then you mentioned DEXA, absolutely, particularly as you age. Everyone should get their bone density checked. And I'm not sure what the sort of reimbursement is like in Australia, but it's a few $100s here. Absolutely. For men, your anabolic hormonal profile, so testosterone, total testosterone, and bioavailable testosterone, they're not the same. And you need to focus on bioavailable testosterone, and that's really the T that's available in the body for use. So those panels, a lot of interest here in the US about some of the more advanced blood lipid panels for heart health, like APOB, which is a big one, which is, Peter Attia is big on. Obviously we have a big push with what we're doing from a corporate perspective around a whole suite of new biomarkers with both our Pulse device and the Excel through Connect Health, in terms of really trying to evangelize a whole new suite of arterial biomarkers like arterial stiffness, heart stress, pulse pressures, which is the ability to basically non-invasively measure the vascular health of the major organs, brain, kidneys, heart, of course. And then inflammation markers like HS, CRP, homocysteine C-reactive protein is a big marker. And then I think, if you're looking at, for those people who are on testosterone therapy, needing to monitor that, obviously continuing to monitor your natural T levels, but you need to monitor your prostate-specific antigen, PSA, as you age. And men should really start monitoring that after 40. So here in the US, they say only after 55 and only if you're at risk. But at 38 years old, my PSA was, I had my PSA measured for the first time, and I was like, off the charts. And so I went through a whole rabbit hole of biopsies and just, nightmare of tests over like 5 years, ultimately, no cancer or anything, but it really threw me down this sort of rabbit hole. But you should get a PSA test. You should get your hematocrit levels tested, because guys who are on TRT are at risk of blood thickening. And then, every man, makes jokes around it, but, DRE, digital rectal examination, on a yearly basis with your physician. So those are kind of the top of my head tests. Some of the stuff that I do, like specifically outside of that, it pretty much covers it all. I do a bunch of tests, which I can forward you to maybe put in the links around cognitive health. I need to sort of dig those out. Then I take a bunch of supplements and things, but a lot of my sort of like streams of supplements are really focused on, cognitive health, bone health, performance fitness. I have a really unique, might be interesting to the listeners. I have a very unique mix that I've been using for like 15 years now, which is kind of like my workout mix, which is sodium bicarbonate, teaspoon of sodium bicarbonate, beta-alanine, teaspoon of beta-alanine, and then, like everyone is doing now, about 5 to 10 grams of creatine. And I mix that with, branched chain amino acids, and that's like, I'm good to go. Those 3 supplements are the most scientifically researched performance supplements which are legal in the United States. And, together, I've just found that they've just been, just amazing for particularly for high intensity sort of performance workouts.
I mean, you find your recovery's better. You find your
everything
contract more energy when you train. Yeah,
totally. I mean, the percentage increases around performance in the studies are, tiny, like 7 to 9% over mostly, long distance cycling teams. But yeah, I find that intensity and recovery just, super enhanced by that.
It really seems that unless you're proactive and take the bull by the horn and say to yourself that if I want to live long and live well, I need to build a team around me that are proactive with my health and I can trust, then you're just one of the pack that just go along blindly, and something goes wrong in your life and it's too late.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the message in all of this, and there'll be people listening that wouldn't know some of the markers that you're talking about, because I don't know some of them, but and Carl and I've got a team that do all our bloods, and they're experts in what they do, and they're all about preventative health. So you get on top of it early, right? And there'll be stats there that say, that if you exercise most days of your life, you get an extra 7 or 9 years compared to people that don't. And there'll be definitely a stat there that says if you do what we're doing, then that would add this many years compared to people that don't, because we're getting on top of it. So I think that's a really important message.
Yeah. And it's pretty simple at the end of the day, Leach, as if you can sleep better, drink less, like I drink very little, if anything, maintain your body weight, be nutritionally sound. If you can do those basics, I have friends who text me. One guy texted me this week, he's probably 30 pounds overweight. Should I be taking peptides or rapamycin? I'm going, dude, where did you hear that? Right? It's like, what you need to do. This is all just like candy floss on top of the cake.
They cut the corners on purpose because they want the shortcut, right? The shortcut is the human sort of go-to when you've got a bit of laziness and you're not disciplined, right? So
totally. Everyone wants a pill, right? Everyone wants, look at Ozempic and semaglutides and the GLP-1s. That's like, it's the magic pill, right? It's like, but they still, even when they start to lose weight, feel better. They still don't go that extra mile and increase their weight training, which you need to do, because basically you lose muscle mass as you lose your fat, or they won't make dietary changes. And that's why 60% of people who go on it fall off after 3 to 5 months, because it just becomes too hard.
Craig, I'm just gonna wind the clock back a little bit. I've got a couple of key questions for you, but you talked about your pre-workout supplements, and you said 7 to 9%. It's tiny. When you put that in context, that's the difference, particularly in a cycling team, between winning the Tour de France and being a first-year domestique. It's absolutely significant. So if you're having a 7 to 9% bump in your performance through training just because of your supplementation, it's a big step up. It's a big free kick.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
I did want to come back a little bit, just so that the listeners, we've got a range of listeners that, the 3 or 4 people that tune in regularly that might be that 40, 50 and 60. And Leachy sort of talked about, I'm in my very, very early 50s and he's sort of late 60s. So can you give us a little bit of an insight into the typical things that you think take place that each decade should focus on? And just a thumbnail sketch, 40s, 50s, 60s, because I think we're learning a lot here, and people do come here to learn from those people who have proven this to be the case.
Look, I think looking back, I would add that one of my biggest struggles, apart from sleeping, is just avoiding injury, right? And I think that goes hand in hand with reducing intensity and load and some of the other sort of ways I train. If I was advising my 40-year-old self, my load and intensity is really what's taking me out of the game of just so many things that I love today. Like, I know Leach is a big golfer. I can't play golf anymore. I had back surgery 4 years ago. I was a big surfer. That's why I moved to the Gold Coast. I can't go from flexion to extension anymore, because of my back surgery. So now I'm sort of I train to be more like a oak tree rather than a reed in the wind, right? To be like, I have tensile strengths, but not the flexibility that, I had in my 40s. And so what I would say is that, like, everything catches up with you. So you have to make a decision, like, at some point in your life, as to how much you want to push, how much load, how much intensity. I don't think, looking back on, Guy's career and my life, neither of us would have done anything different. But I think go into it with the acceptance that at some point you're going to pay the price for it. And it's either going to be your knees, your hips, your back, or something. everybody has something, will have something. So to my 40-year-old self, that would be my principal piece of advice. And then I think 50s into 60s, I think is pretty much everything I outlined in my book around, weight training, around really around the things that matter as you age, around maintaining bone density, maintaining hormonal health. I mean, a little bit of secret, given that there's only 4 listers on this program, so it won't be widely known. So I take a 5 milligram Cialis tablet every day. So I take it because it's co-indicated in the United States. People listening, you go, oh yeah, that's why you take it. But I honestly do. It's co-indicated in the United States for nocturia, a benign prostatic hyperplasia. So, rather than getting up, 2 or 3 times at night, I now only get up once. So Cialis is indicated for that.
I need that. Can you just email me what that is?
I'll put it in a little brown package, Leachy, and send it.
You don't need to worry about that yet, Carl. It's coming though.
Well, yeah, I know way too much about you. Know way too much about me, and I know way too much about you, Leachy. But yeah, I'm looking forward to you getting a little brown package.
I'm keen on that.
Craig, just moving us sort of up the body a little bit anatomically, you are now focused quite heavily in heart health in terms of products and your keen focus. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, I've got a history of heart disease, but, I can't say back in, 18 when I was being cut open on the Gold Coast that, I had any indication that, it would be sort of my passion and sort of life and, what I see as the final chapter. So, I got into it, I think twofold. I got into the sector for 2 reasons, I should say. One is about 5 or 6 years ago, I was looking for something to do in Sydney because I'd sent my daughters back there to go to UNSW. They'd grown up, since I was 6 here in California where we live. And I was introduced to a whole bunch of deals, and I got introduced to this company called what was called Accor at the time. Accor had been in business 25 years, but had basically been put in the bottom drawer of most of the brokers. It was publicly traded, but it had a very, very unique piece of technology, which was market opportunity, but from a revenue perspective, they just hadn't focused it. Sort of to give you just a little bit of a soundbite on the technology. So the founder was able to show around 25, 30 years ago that through a non-invasive technique, basically through a traditional brachial cuff, like you have in a primary care physician's office for measuring your blood pressure, and a whole series of algorithms that they developed, that they could measure the equivalent pressures that were actually occurring at your heart, at the descending aorta, as well as at the major organs, as I mentioned, brain, kidneys, obviously heart, and also the placenta in maternal health. So it was just fascinating. And it really, to me, was an opportunity to disrupt what was a 150-year-old technology with a traditional sphygmomanometer for blood pressure and introduce a whole new suite of arterial biomarkers, which are much more predictive of arterial risk for a whole multitude of diseases than traditional blood pressure. So myself and my business partner, Neil Cairns, we invested in it. We have a vision to basically disrupt the whole arterial health diagnostic industry and, really become the default device for practitioners to measure in practice, as well as for consumers to take control of their health at home, and particularly with sort of deep arterial health insights.
And where are you at with that now? What stage of that journey?
So it's just perfect timing for us to have this call, Carl. We started shipping this week. It literally was 4 years in development for the most recent product that we've just released on Connect Health. That's Connect with a QT at the end. We had a device previously, which we sold principally into pharmaceutical companies and research institutions. It was like a $35,000 device. We've now been able to put that same technology into, sub $500 box for consumers. So we got FDA clearance last year. We're now shipping this week. We had 5,000 arrive on our doorstep this week of part of the first order. So we're actually fulfilling this week, but unfortunately only in the United States, because that's where we're cleared for at the moment, but soon to be Australia.
You talk about disruption, but really, I suppose what you're doing is you're giving people that potentially could die from a heart incident that the old testing might not pick up. And with a new modernized version of what you're doing, you would probably get through to more people and put the alarms up before something went wrong.
Yeah, it's 100% of the technology is sort of founded in that guy. I mean, particularly really the tip of the spear, what we're trying to evangelize in the market is really creating awareness and education around arterial stiffness, which is a biomarker that we measure. And that really precedes hypertension anywhere from sort of 6 months to 6 years. So we can really get 6 years ahead of the pathway to disease for really the world's greatest killer, which is, hypertension, hypertensive related disorders.
In training groups I've taken over the years, there's been 3 heart attacks or 3 heart incidents where we've had to go and intervene. 2 of them, luckily, we saved these people. But my mate, who it was only like 9 years ago now that he dropped in a training session down in Manly that I took, and we couldn't get him back. And technology that you're talking about could have been the difference in him picking it up before that happened.
There's an 18% increase in young cardiovascular events, that's under 18. There's a 66% increase in cardiovascular events between 18 to 44. And globally, 38% of deaths are caused by cardiovascular disease. So to me, when you talk about longevity, you can't have that discussion without having arterial health at the forefront of it, because we shouldn't be talking about, NAD supplements and plunges in terms of longevity. We should be focused on what's killing people the most, right?
That's just the frilly icing on the cake. I mean, my thing with all of that, and I get a bit angry with it, in that, mate, if you don't go and do the main things, you don't even get to talk about ice baths. And if you haven't got your heart checked by the time you're 40 years of age, I say, and if you've got any history in your family, it should be done immediately. When if you know that you've got a family history, then you're an idiot. And we sent off the back of my mate not making it 9 years ago. There was 100 predominantly blokes from the age of 40 and 70 in my training group, and Carl was one of those guys. And I said to them all, you've got 3 months to go to a doctor, get a referral to a cardiologist to get checked up, because this will happen again if we don't get on top of it. And these people were all in the 1% of the fittest, healthiest people for their age in Australia. And so all the ones that hadn't been checked in the last 2 years with their heart went away and did that. 5 of them had to have stents put straight in. Out of less than 100. So it was probably about 8-9% of people that you looked at with their in board shorts and no shirt on, and you look at them and going, you're in good shape. And they had to go and get stents put in. So there you go.
Yeah, so 2 things. I'd add one more test to your point, and to Carl's point before, colonoscopy. So 100%. The amount of guys that I've had to drag along, it's just like drives me insane. How many times I've said to them, if it's not for you, it's for your family. Get your literal ass in there and get it done, right? And then, to your point around, because I know you guys have talked about Dave Scott on the podcast when I listened to your conversation around that. I mean, Dave Scott had his surgery in 24, but in 22, he had 2 heart ablations. So he could have been ahead of the curve in terms of educating people about it a little bit more. And I think a lot of people have probably been influenced by him in getting checked up, just by the fact that he became more public about it, right?
I reckon when it first happened to him, so I don't know, Dave, when you're an endurance athlete and you've been the best in the world and you're tough and people look at you like you're Superman, you don't want to show your weakness, I suppose, when something hits for the first time. You're probably nearly like scared of ruining the persona, maybe, or even just deep down, you're just in shock that something could happen to someone that has just done so many unbelievable things.
Right. Yeah, but you've seen, I think it's like load and intensity. We're seeing it, the other data point I missed before.
They were animals, those guys back in the day too. I used to follow Dave Scott, and he was my hero in the early 80s that got me into the endurance sport. And it was all about, if I could do an extra hour on you in training for the day, then I've got you. You're mine. And that was the mindset without any science behind it. So, and Carl did triathlon for a number of years as well. And that was the badge of honor, wasn't it, in the 80s? It really was.
Totally. The other data point that I missed before, cardiovascular disease is also the #1 killer of college athletes now in the United States. and principally black men. So out of control.
Not getting checked.
Basketball players, black basketball players, like index every single college athlete in terms of cardiovascular events. So, across the board, I mean, we've been on, this call for 45 minutes. So, there's been 90 heart attacks in the United States in the time that we've been on this call. So,
wow. It's an interesting, if I look at both of you from a much younger perspective, you've moved through this in a similar manner. I mean, Leachy, I know that story that you told about Chucky and our friend that passed, and I know that it drove you really with your ferocious sort of intent towards heart health and particularly defibs. And then from that, you started looking more in a preventative sense, which is sort of where we are now with longevity in your work. Craig, just before we wind up, what's next? Like, what can we expect from Craig Cooper in the next sort of 10 or 15 years?
Carl, I just want to keep thriving. I mean, for me, longevity, because of my history of all my diseases, all my near-death experiences, nearly on top of all my medical diseases, I've nearly drowned 3 times, I've been held under rocks at Tavarua, surfing, I've fallen off buildings, skateboarding, I've been struck by lightning. My view of longevity is kind of qualified by the fact that I don't think I'm going to make it out the day most of the time. So, it's a lot of memento mori for me in terms of my approach, in terms of, you could die today. So I just want to continue just thriving the best that I can, in the moment, from a health perspective. We've got a big mission corporately and everything that we're trying to do with Cardiex and with Connect Health. So that's really, my professional life going forward. And then, I just want to be, I'm suffering like all of us on this call, the degenerative impact of aging.
I think we're voting you as the best looking over 60-year-old we've had on as a guest.
Thanks, buddy.
You're going good.
I think he's the only one, isn't he? So you did mention that that your product is only really FDA approved. How far away are we from getting TGA approval and getting access to it in Australia?
About 4 to 6 months.
Okay.
But we can get some devices shipped over to you guys, and I don't know. Did we ship some over previously in advance?
We've got a few books that we'll give away off the back of.
Awesome. And then we'll get a couple of Pulse devices over to you guys, so we can look after you with those. But I think that's kind of it, Carl. It's like every day it gets harder, to get up, to keep going, push forward, and also due to the fact that I'm kind of finding myself more and more on the outlier of my friends who can keep up with me, and so. That's becoming more of a sort of lone endeavor in terms of just my passion for doing events and keeping pushing forward. And, I'm continuously, sending out, WhatsApp groups and go, hey, let's do this mountain bike race, or, let's do this swim run at Catalina. And it's like, I get disappointed with people that they're not keeping up with me, but.
Well, Fuely, who we both
fight that. Let's call him out on that. Call him out. 10 texts later, he'll sign up for something.
Yeah, right.
But, it's a big thing. And as you age, your friend group just naturally falls away. This is not just me. I mean, I think the numbers now in the United States are like, I think it's 1 in 3 males don't have a friend in the United States. 1 in 3 males. I mean, loneliness is an epidemic that's been, amplified by COVID first and now social media. We can, and I think with AI, it's just going to be super amplified, the ability to just have literal virtual girlfriends, and it's going to happen. So I think getting out there and continuing to push and continuing just to, be the best you can be for yourself. And for me, a lot of that is, doing events and participating in, age group races and things like that. I say participating, not competing. Just participate.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? Just my last question, but how do you deal with the fact that you're not as good as you used to be? Because, I went to golf for a number of reasons, but I think the main one for me was that at 61, I can still improve at something that all the other sporting endeavors I do, I'll never be what I used to be. And in some ways that tortures me to think. And I get that business is fun and making money is a game too. And you can compete in that area and still get better as you get older. But from a sporting and physical sense, it's a lot different, right?
Totally. I mean, I don't have the solution for it, Leachy. It's just something that, I do suffer from, I wouldn't say depression, but it definitely affects me.
I'm going to be your friend. I'm going to be your friend from now on because I think you and I are very similar. Very similar.
I'm being completely open about it.
Oh, geez.
No, it really affects me. My wife, her worst fear is if I have an injury that takes me out, for extended periods. And I'm not saying that jokingly, because she knows just how much it'll impact me mentally. Because people go, "Oh, you train so hard. It's like vain. You got to stay in shape." I said, "Dude, it's freaking sanity. It's not vanity."
It's everything, right? You want to look good. You want to feel good.
Yeah.
It's part of your DNA. Like I've got to have shoulder surgery for a bicep tear that needs to be fixed, and I keep putting it off because I just don't want to stop even doing the stuff that I can do. So just keep putting it back another 3 months, and some stage I've got to go and face it, but I just can't do it at the moment because I'm like, I'll be sitting out for 3 to 4 months, and mentally that could kill me. Yeah.
That's why I don't road bike anymore. I just mountain bike and I take it super easy.
Yeah.
If I fall off a bike and I'm out for 6 months, I don't have 6 months.
No.
When I was in my 20s, 30s, 6 months, no problem. Bounce back. I don't have 6 months.
No, Carlos is still doing the bike stuff. So,
well, it's the closest we come. I think it's the closest we come to flying without actually having a jumpsuit on. So it's very addictive, and because it's good for you and it gives you that thrill. But look, we've had some big accidents here on the Northern Beaches. The traffic, the world-class cyclists, just as a point of trivia that no one's particularly interested in, world-class cyclists come to Australia and they say the most hostile environment they're ever in terms of traffic is Australia, and particularly Sydney. So it is really difficult and it's very dangerous. But look, gravel bike riding's taken off, to your point around mountain biking and different options. But just having something in your diary, in your calendar to participate in, I think makes a massive difference, regardless of your performance goals. We come from that me focus into this we focus, which is a lot more moderate and a lot healthier. I think the next time we have you on the show, we will have reviewed the products. Hopefully, Leachy, you will have read past the first few pages in the book. I can explain most of that to you, and then we can see where we're up to at that point in time.
I'd say just one more thing, Carl, and then we can leave. I think the most important thing as you age is to just, to my point before about events and participating and getting teams and people to do that with you. It's really making an effort to curate your friends, because it's people drop away, people become complacent, and it's really hard to maintain your friend group. So being active in curating your friends as you age is something that I've really, really made an effort to do. And I talked before about when we used to plunge up at Laird Hamilton's house back in the summers. That was really the start of how I tried to be more active about it, because what Laird was so good at was just curating people at all ages, at all levels, but of interest in something, bringing them together as a group every week, and just really, expanding, his and everyone else's network. So it's a real active thing for me. And I always got to work at it because it's hard and I get let down a lot. I feel like I do, but I just keep it up, because otherwise, I love my wife dearly, but we need our mates.
Yeah.
You
need to get a mate, Carl.
I've got to get one. I mean, I'm just looking at you two thinking you're sort of a carbon copy of each other, because Leachy's very good at creating community, very, very good at it. And no one knows why, because his personality is not conducive to it. But for me personally, I don't have any friends, and I love the idea of you saying I've got a friend who just built Cortana, which is his AI girlfriend, and he demoed it to me. He's a tech guy, and he demoed it to me this week, and it really isn't. It's essentially that Joaquin Phoenix film, Her, where he can pick up a conversation that he just had with her 3 days ago and say, "What did we talk about last?" And she'll say, "Well, you're trying on those spandex pants, and I was really giving you some positive feedback." I'm like, you can have these relationships that are so important to us, but of course, I don't think that is that is not the answer in terms of relational health.
Oh my God, yeah, no.
Yeah. Yeah. But Nora's talking to Leachy for more than an hour at any given time. So thanks so much for joining us on the program.